after 3.5 years that Christ had tried to speak the truth, he told his disciples, he said, if you don't have a sword, go buy one.
We're prepared to do whatever it takes to settle this matter without any further bloodshed.
He told me, he said, Grandma, it's coming a time that we're going to have to protect our homes.
The person was knelt down with his hands cupped, from which a flame erupted.
The fingers of blame that have been pointed all make no difference here. They are empty and meaningless as we mourn the loss of each child's life.
They just don't believe that, well, they just don't believe that I'm who I claim that I am.
February 28, 1993, the beginning of a 51-day standoff between federal law enforcement and the Branch Davidians, a group who followed the religious teachings of a man named David Koresh. His followers, who spent their time in a compound north of Waco, would later come face to face with agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and explosives. The standoff would later end in tragedy, a fire breaking out in the compound. 86 people dead by the end of it all, including Koresh. Born Vernon Wayne Howell in 1959 here in Houston, decades later, he would legally change his name to what history will remember him by, David Koresh. Let's take a look back on who he was before becoming a cult leader.
Have I committed adultery?
This man thinks he is the Son of God. David Koresh believes he is preparing the world and his followers for the end of time. Some members of his Branch Davidian cult also say he believes in having sex with children and the elderly.
What do? Messiah comes and molests little children and has sex with all the women, and I mean, some Messiah
Do you have
that
sex
is,
with
huh?
all the women there?
Huh?
Do you have sex with all the women there?
Well, read the article. You know what it says?
Read the article.
I guess from 8 to 80.
Koresh had frequent phone conversations with a Waco radio announcer, and after he became the subject of a Waco newspaper investigation, he expected a confrontation with authorities.
It devastates me. It separates men from the truth of God.
What are you going to do?
Well, that's something that if I told you, you wouldn't believe me, so I have to show you.
He had a sad look in his eyes. Looked like he just wanted you to reach out and, be loved.
Vernon Howell's grandmother says she knew something was troubling him when he came to Houston to visit a few months ago.
I thought then, he looked like to me something was really happening to him. He looked sad. And he said, I wish my family could be together.
This is how she remembered him. She raised Vernon for a time when he was a baby. His mother and father were never married. And as a young child, his mother took him away and never contacted the Houston relatives. Only a few months ago was he reunited with his grandmother and father.
I told him I didn't want to talk religion, so we didn't discuss any religion. Because the time I'd seen him before, he preached to me the whole time we were together.
That was the first time he saw his father, and he wanted him to go to Israel with him.
His tongue is the pen of a ready writer. So how's God going to talk to me in the latter days?
This Australian TV documentary shows a side of Vernon Howell they never knew. The cult leader who claimed to be Jesus and who commanded a band of heavily armed followers.
Do you believe he's the Son of God?
I hope he is.
Former cult members claim Howell believed as father of their commune he could have sex with anyone, including young children. He told the Australian crew it was a lie.
Have I committed adultery? Is what you're fixing to ask?
Have you committed adultery?
No, I don't commit adultery.
You telling me the truth?
I'm telling you the truth.
Howell made several religious pilgrimages to Israel. He also came to Houston to buy guns. His grandmother and father saw a carload of weapons he picked up during his last visit at a local gun show.
He told me, he said, Grandma, it's coming a time that we're going to have to protect our homes. We don't go out and kill nobody, but we got to protect our homes and our families. And he told me some scripture, in the Bible. And I said, Vernon, you're going to get in trouble with these guns. He said, I'm not taking them out nowhere.
But Hal made it clear a year ago he was ready to use his arsenal if challenged.
They come in here with a gun and they start shooting at us, what would you do? Tell me, be realistic. This is America. This is not Australia. This is not Europe. This is not where a country overthrows a bunch of people, takes away their weapons so that the people cannot argue any issues.
What about these people here?
Well, those people here are people, well, you know what they think of me? They think I'm the son of God.
He should have gave up to start with. I don't see why in the world he wanted to try to resist the officers. They had a federal warrant for him. He should have gave up and went to court with them. And if he'd done something wrong, he should pay for it. But I can't see him getting killed. I'd like for him to give up.
This would eventually become one of the most deadly government-led assaults on U.S. soil. At the center of it all was the voice of one man. Here's how the siege began.
They say they planned it this way. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms spent months investigating and several days practicing a raid on the cult's compound. There might have been a much simpler approach.
A number of people in the community around this settlement say that Mr. Koresh or Powell or Christ or whoever he is was known to come in and out of that place on a daily basis. Why wasn't a stakeout just set up and him nabbed rather than this confrontational approach?
I couldn't answer that, sir. That is, obviously they had the reasons for setting it up the way they did. They practiced this in a way that they thought would save the most lives.
Instead, 4 agents were killed and 2 cult members, one of them a 2-year-old. The agency believes David Koresh and his followers were tipped off. But before the assault began, 3 government helicopters circled the compound.
Has a mistake been made, or would ATF take the same tactical approach on this if it were doing it again today?
Well, hindsight's always 20/20. You know, there might be a thing we might change here and there, but our agents practiced for days and days and days on this, and they had it planned for months. So I don't think there's really anything they did wrong.
Though their investigation lasted 8 months, ATF apparently did not get complete information on the firepower of Koresh's cult. The government let itself be outgunned by a rock gospel singer who thinks he is Christ. And they might have just been able to take him into custody during his next trip into town.
They practiced it in a way where they could get their hands on him and protect the people in the compound. And
just nabbing him when he comes out the door seems to be a little bit safer.
Well, sometimes you think that would be the best way to do it, but obviously the people that planned the strategy had their reasons. I can't explain them.
No one has been able to explain why agents just drove up to the main house in 2 covered cattle trucks and stepped out into a torrent of gunfire. Maybe that's because nobody can.
Reinforcements have arrived from around the country. A C-130 transport plane brought in specially trained commandos. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms says it is putting together a new team that may go up against the cult again if negotiations break down. A small army of special forces drove in a caravan of 17 vehicles to within a mile of the compound. Each van contained men outfitted in full military gear.
Lights go.
After they were in place, the FBI ordered scores of media gathered here from around the world to move to a position 3 miles from the compound. This followed a day when negotiations seemed to be working between the cult and the FBI. Cult leader David Koresh released what is believed to be the last 4 children living in the compound. As many as 70 adults, all believed heavily armed, remain with their leader in a dormitory-style building complete with underground bunkers. A combined federal strike force is determined not to make the same misjudgments the ATF apparently made when it chose to storm the cult headquarters on Sunday. The ATF says its agents planned the raid for months, but somehow something went horribly wrong. The agents believe Koresh's cult was tipped off, but before the assault, 3 government helicopters reportedly circled the compound. There are questions tonight about why the agents didn't use a simpler approach in trying to arrest a man wanted for weapons violations.
I couldn't answer that, sir. That is, obviously they had the reasons for setting it up the way they did. They practiced this in a way that they thought would save the most lives.
After the last child was released, Someone in the compound defiantly raised a blue and white flag bearing the Star of David, a symbol of the biblical warrior who killed Goliath.
In heaven, my father gave me a book, and in 1959 I was born. It's a mystery of Matthew 24, where the carcasses of eagles be gathered. Scripture is put into a code so that the ungodly should not understand, as Daniel 11 and 12 tells us. So the New Testament church was told after John's day that there'd come a revelation according to 7 seals.
During the 13-minute interview, David Koresh talked of his beliefs and how this episode might end.
In Scripture, in Psalms 2, for instance, the key of David, Christ tells you he has the key of David. He can open up something with the key of David. In Psalms 2, it says the heathen will rage. They'll imagine vain things, and they'll go against the Lord and his anointed. And they'll say, let us break his bands and cast his cords from us. The thing that binds Christ, the true Christ, to the Father is 7 seals. The Lamb has 7 eyes. He knows exactly what the 7 seals are. Now, the reason why Revelation talks about Babylon is because any man who stood up saying that he's a witness for Christ and has not known the 7 seals is false.
He talked about the buildup of weapons.
After 3.5 years that Christ had tried to speak the truth, he told his disciples, he said, if you don't have a sword, go buy one. Of course, what happens is, again, when you learn the seals, then you get this information through the seals, because nobody wants to listen to my doctrine.
Koresh says there are dozens of people inside the compound.
There's more than 75 by far, and there's a lot more children than what they've said, too.
How many children?
Well, I don't want to disclose that, but they'll know when we send them out 2 by 2.
Can you give us an idea of their ages? Are we talking mostly below teenage?
They're from infants all the way up to, 10 and 11 years old.
And he says he's called his mother.
I told her, I said, look, we know how it all began. I've never had anything from her. She chose her own way. It's like Psalms 27, when mother and father forsake me, they forsook me. The reason being is they just don't believe that, they just don't believe that I'm who I claim that I am. But I told her, I says, Mama, they got me, and I love you, and remember, I don't hold anything against you. It's just, they just don't want to hear the truth. And so I hung up.
As federal agents defended their actions, the cost of that day was becoming painfully clear, both in strategy and in sacrifice.
We expected this thing to go without anybody being injured. Months and months of planning went into this.
The ATF sent in one of its big guns to handle today's media firing line. The fact that federal authorities have felt under siege was evident by the barricades that went up to keep press members corralled. Similar barricades have been erected to keep news crews at least 2 miles from the cult compound.
The reason we don't want a camera there is they watch television and they watch us approach. If we do anything, we're not going to assault the place. But anything we do around there to get control, that is precisely why you can't have a camera there.
For the first time, ATF talked in detail about what TV cameras have already captured, a raid that turned into a bloodbath. They confirmed the cult was apparently tipped off by a phone call. It let David Koresh and his followers know federal agents were approaching from 3 sides, heading toward the building where heavy weapons were stored.
They got into the building, and once they got into that room, firing started coming through the walls. They were spraying indiscriminately. We had to wait for a target because there were so many women and children that were usually at prayers during that time.
Hartnett backed away from an earlier ATF claim that the agents were simply outgunned. Today, he said the mission failed because his men lost the element of surprise. The FBI downplayed the chances of another raid.
We're prepared to do whatever it takes and stay here as long as it takes to settle this matter without any further bloodshed.
The FBI is negotiating with Koresh and 3 or 4 other cult members, but the cult leader has already broken a promise to surrender if authorities allowed him to go on nationwide radio.
He says that he did not fulfill his promise to leave immediately with his followers because God told him to wait.
Those who knew him say Stephen Willis had what it took to be one of the untouchables, the Prohibition-era nickname given federal alcohol agents.
Aggressive, a little cocky, very confident, but he was a good agent.
Willis graduated at the front of his academy class 3 years ago and was on the front line of yesterday's assault of the Waco compound. He was one of the 4 agents cut down and killed by gunfire. Don Carter was Willis's superior at the Houston ATF office.
When I took the call, I sat down in my chair and turned around in my chair, and I did. I said a prayer, and for a while I couldn't move. And I've been on this job 16 years, and I tell you, it hurts. It's a feeling that no one can ever express to you until you've been through it yourself.
Willis was widely known around Houston police stations and firehouses. As a federal firearms agent, he often trained with the Houston SWAT team. And as a specialist in arson and in violent gangs, he worked with the Houston Fire Department and local police agencies.
Vernon, if you're listening, please, son, please give up. There's no more bloodshed. Should be no more bloodshed.
A grandfather's plea echoed beyond the barricades, hoping his words could bring an end to all the chaos. Meanwhile, the siege stretched into its 7th week. The FBI turned to one last possible lifeline, David Koresh's attorney.
Heavy rains, thunder, and lightning pounded the Koresh compound this morning, but if the phones still work, Koresh's attorney is scheduled to talk to his client. It will be Dick DeGuerin's first conversation with David Koresh in over a week. The FBI has said it is only allowing DeGuerin access to Koresh if it will help convince the cult to surrender. DeGuerin says this could be his last shot, but he's not ruling anything out.
I don't want to mislead you by saying that this is our last chance. That's not the way I see this telephone call. It's one final discussion with David over about a lot of things, and when he's going to come out is only one of the subjects that we're going to cover.
The FBI did not express any great optimism that DeGuerin could get the cult to come out, but the agents say that the 46-day standoff is clearly wearing the cult down.
There's a lot of references during the negotiations to the fact that they haven't slept for X period of hours or days.
The FBI agents think DeGuerin is trying to get the cult to surrender by sometime later today or tomorrow, but agents say from what they've seen so far, they don't believe it'll happen. In Waco, Dave Failing, 11 News.
As the fire consumed the compound, the tragic loss of life was felt far beyond the ashes. While authorities sifted through the rubble, the community mourned, and questions about the events continued to linger around the Waco area.
The FBI used a tank equipped with a boom to repeatedly punch through the walls of the cult compound. With each piercing blow, tear gas was pumped into the complex. At one point, a Branch Davidian member hung a sign from a window stating, "We want our phone back." Moments later, the tank rammed through the front door of the facility. 6 hours into the operation, smoke started pouring from an upstairs window. Minutes later, a man climbed onto the roof as flames began to devour the building. The FBI says the gas it used did not start the blaze and then pointed a finger at cult followers. One agent reported seeing a man dressed in black wearing a gas mask in a second-floor window moments before flames were spotted. The person was knelt down with his hands cupped, from which a flame erupted. One of the people who survived reportedly told lawmen the fire was purposely set. When we interviewed him, he said that he heard discussions of using lantern fuel to spread it throughout the compound.
10 minutes after the blaze started, the compound was engulfed by flames. Fire trucks showed up 20 minutes later, but by then there was nothing firefighters could do.
We can only assume that there was a massive loss of life. It was truly an inferno of flames, as everyone observed.
Only 9 people are known to have survived the fire, and it would appear David Koresh is among the dead. He had often said his prophecy would be fulfilled if he died while fighting federal agents. In a roundabout way, he may have gotten his wish.
I wish to welcome you to this service of prayer and lament in response to yesterday's tragedy outside of this community.
The minister called this first memorial service a chance to stop the pain. It has been hard on this community, and especially for those who think about the children who died in the compound fire.
We weep for the children The 10 billion words that have been written, the speculations that have been made, the fingers of blame that have been pointed, all make no difference here. They are empty and meaningless as we mourn the loss of each child's life.
Governor Ann Richards said she felt she must attend this service in her hometown and said she was sorry the end was not better.
I just feel so badly about the families involved here, the families of the people who were in that compound, the families of the law enforcement officers.
Richards says she's confident Texas Rangers will eventually answer questions of what happened inside, but they will have to deal with conflicting stories. As surviving cult members were led into federal court, one cult member said those inside did not commit suicide.
One of the tanks knocked over a gas lantern and it started fire on some bales of hay that were lying around.
It wasn't said intentionally?
No, there was no plan for suicide.
The mother of surviving cult member David Thibodeau already knows what she believes.
I think what happened yesterday was an abomination, and I think that we have to look into it very carefully and for a very long time.
But the investigation is likely to go on a long time. The ordeal for Waco is not over.
As the decades passed, Waco's identity found a way to evolve, but the scars of the past still lingered.
On a country road 12 miles northeast of Waco, the wide open spaces and the quiet can still be a shock to your senses. Or behind a wrought iron gate with doves of peace on one side and the crucifixion on the other. The names, all these names, hit you next. The 82 Branch Davidians who died, but not the names of the 4 ATF agents who died in the initial shootout. A monument that still draws daily visitors like David Stottlemyre from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it was definitely not a good thing.
Who says this place is still what Waco is to the rest of the world. If someone in Pennsylvania, I said, have you ever heard of Waco, Texas, what's the first thing they would think
They
of?
would think of this, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much the only thing back there you know of.
Some of those things become burned into our memories and our brains, and that's part of what people come for.
But at the Waco Visitor Center, where they will gladly give you a map to help you find the former Branch Davidian compound, they're also glad Waco is now known for something else. Just ask 2 tourists from California, like we did.
Chip and JoJo.
JoJo, yes,
absolutely.
Paulette and Greg Horton are among the estimated 1.6 million people who come to Waco each year just to see Magnolia, the silo district, and shop at the home improvement mecca created by Chip and Joanna Gaines. That's why the Visitors Bureau has cardboard cutouts of the duo all over town.
Outside of Texas, yes, that's they would oftentimes think of the Davidian compound. But that's why we're so happy that Chip and Joanna decided to make this their home.
Our 27-year-old and our 22-year-old don't associate Waco with the Branch Davidians at all. No, it's
Magnolia.
Magnolia, that's what we think of.
Make no mistake, the scar is still very much here. The Branch Davidian monument, donated by a Texas militia group, remains a rallying cry for anti-government voices everywhere.
How do you get people to forget about something? Dallas still is known for the JFK situation there, so you can't make people forget about something, but hopefully over the years Waco has added new attractions. That's all you can do. I think that's all any city can really do.
Move on, move forward, but never forget Waco's lost souls.
The events of 1993 left a mark on Waco, Texas, one that continues to shape the community and its history. That tragedy left an emotional impact on Houston and the rest of Texas. As Waco moves forward, it does so with a painful past, but a resilient spirit. Thanks for watching on KHOU 11+.